What's a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will F up a child later in life? Story 1. Anytime a child is playing with a child of the opposite gender and they respond, "Oh, who's your boy son's girlfriend?" That completely stopped me from even speaking to girls until damn near high school. I just saw this happen in front of my eyes not too long ago. My aunt started teasing my 12-year-old cousin because she found out that a girl he was friends with had a little crush on him. Welp, that friendship ended right then and there. My cousin was obviously super embarrassed. Of course, my aunt made the big announcement in front of a bunch of people. I was so mad at my aunt. Like, what the did she expect? Story 2. Discouraging them from asking questions. Yes, it can be annoying to keep hearing, but why daddy/mummy? But I've met far too many adults who admit they stopped asking questions because as a kid, their parents would shut them up or be like, there she goes, asking questions again. Inquisitive minds need that fostered. Another good strategy to help develop creativity and problem solving while not shutting down the questioning is when your kid asks you a question, ask them, what do you think? Or why do you think it's that way? Especially if it's something that doesn't have a factual answer. Story 3. Never showing up for events. I remember my parents didn't come to most of my chorus concerts. It really sucked to see my classmates' families cheer them on while my parents were absent. I brought home one of my chorus program papers to show my parents and I found it in the trash the next day. I was sad because I wanted to keep it, but seeing it in the trash, I didn't want it anymore. I love my parents and I don't blame them for not showing up. They are small business owners and it was hard for them to find people who could work for them whenever I had concerts or anything. It still hurts though. Also, the replies to this are very sad. I'm sorry that a lot of you guys went through similar experiences. Second edit. Also, my mom is a clean freak. She'll discard or move any stray papers laying around. She probably didn't think much of it. She might not have even realized what it was. She can't read English that well. It's her third language. After I told her, she apologized to me, so it's okay. I thought I should add that my little sister and grandma would come to them, but my relationship with my grandma isn't great. It's just not the same as having your parents there, if that makes sense. Story 4. Creating an environment where you tell your kid their feelings aren't valid just because they aren't the same as yours or your kid processes their emotions differently than you. Angrily telling your kid they are too sensitive / dramatic / theatrical / hormonal / etc. is just going to mess your kid up and encourage them to bottle emotions up to avoid upsetting you and is going to lead to major communication issues. Also, constantly pushing an intelligent or self-motivated child to work harder and harder and do better. You're setting your kid up to be a perfectionist, which can be incredibly damaging to his or her mental health in the long run. Story 5. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. Of course, I had never seen anything quite so delightful before, and I could barely keep my hands off the little fur ball. So about 2 or 3 days passed. I got up in the morning and walked out and asked, "Where's the kitten?" And my parents told me that he died, implying that my roughhousing had killed it. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years thereafter. In fact, they had simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. Story 6. Not having them do chores. My parents pushed me to be academic, so doted on me hand and foot as a kid to make more room for study. When you're too young and stupid to know any better, you think it's a blessing. When I moved out to uni, I didn't really know how to clean, when to clean, what to clean with, how to wash clothes, how to get them dry, etc. The only thing I could do is cook and binge drink. That's no way to bring up a kid, and it's a steep learning curve doing all that stuff for the first time in your early 20s. It sounds like a super lame answer, but make sure every kid does their fair share of chores. Story 7. Don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother and was very kind to us, but when we were born, she stopped having friends, did not work, and was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easily upset because she had no other source of self-esteem, and any time I screwed up, and I screwed up a lot, it was as if I had levied a very personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left, I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise I wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed, and fell into depression as a defense mechanism, and she took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 8. Saying, I don't care who started it. I grew up with friends whose siblings would target the one with the bad temper, provoke them into a rage, then cry and play victim when they got slapped. In this case, it does matter who started it. A parent has to make it clear that violence isn't okay, but neither is provoking someone into said violence. It doesn't matter that said person never hit or kicked while their sibling did. They never would have gotten hurt in the first place if they didn't encourage the aggression to begin with. Children are clever and will find loopholes in their parents' rules. Parents need to be better and snuff out that kind of BS when it starts. If they don't, they'll raise a manipulator and a scapegoat. One will use them and one will resent them. It's a lose-lose all because of a simple rule. My parents always told me that they didn't care about justice. They cared about peace and quiet, and life isn't fair so I believed them. So since life wasn't fair and all they cared about was peace and quiet, I didn't tell them things or ask for help. I was afraid to yell for help when I was stuck on the porch for hours. They like to tell this as a funny story now. LOL, what a dumb kid, but it's awful for me because I just remember being stuck and in pain and yet too scared of my own parents to call for help. There was no point in telling them things either, like being molested. And now as an adult, my parents are all like, oh, but we just wanted you to be quiet. We didn't mean it. No, you did mean it. That is exactly what you meant. And that's exactly what you said. You wanted me to be quiet no matter what. Quiet? That was the only thing that was important to you. Story 9. Not having a life of your own beyond being a parent. Your child isn't responsible for your happiness. You are. If you build your entire sense of self-worth around your child one, there's a good chance your child will grow up to resent the pressure too. You're setting an example for them to be codependent in their own relationships. Story 10. Pretty much telling you that whatever activity that you enjoy doing is annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. Not only did my sisters tease me for it, but my parents told me to shut up constantly, so I stopped singing. I must have been terrible, right? I sing when I'm alone or jokingly with some friends. What really broke me was when I went to visit everyone for the holidays, and my sister said that she was surprised I never pursued singing, since I seemed to love it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. It's always funny for the ones doing the teasing, but it actually hurts the ones being teased, especially when it's coming from people who are supposed to love you. Story 11. Not stopping when your child says stop, whether it's teasing or tickling or wrestling. Kids who have parents that don't respect their boundaries always seem to end up being the biggest dicks and bullies because they've learned they don't have to respect other people's feelings. Story 12. Never tell your child that you were wrong and that you're sorry. Just never once occurred. My father never once said sorry to me. He was human. There were plenty of times he should have. My kids have heard from me plenty. Story 13. Getting them involved in problems they have no control over. My parents felt the need to keep me in the loop regarding our pending foreclosure and argue in front of me over which one was to blame when I was 10. What possible reason is there to share that with a kid? I barely slept for months. I was convinced the cops were going to bust in at midnight and throw us all outside. Story 14. Not following through with your promises. If you told your child you were buying ice cream tomorrow in the hopes that they'd forget, and the next day when they ask you tell them no, they'll see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sure someone else can explain better what I'm trying to say here without sounding so ridiculous. I taught my children at very young ages that outside of extreme circumstances, failing to keep a promise made is the same as telling a lie. Therefore, I won't make promises to them that I am not absolutely certain I can keep. They learned early in life that I take my promises very seriously and will go to great lengths to honor them. We have hit very hard times recently, and I've had to delay delivery on some promises, which breaks my heart. But they know that I will fulfill those promises eventually and are much more empathetic and understanding than their peers have been in similar situations. Story 15. Well, realistically, it'd be a helicopter parent. You always want to look out for your kid, right? Make sure they're not doing things they're supposed to do. Walk in without knocking. It ruins a relationship with a kid because even though you have a sense of privacy, the kid doesn't and will always be paranoid of anyone entering their room without warning. It ruins a kid. Would my mom let me do this? Is she okay with it? Story 16. Telling kids they have to finish their plate. Sometimes there's too much food. I was overeating for years and it took a lot of work to break the habit and shed the extra weight. Story 17. Sticking through a toxic relationship for the kids. It doesn't help. Part ways, be good parents, spend quality time together with the kids. But don't stay together and fucking hate your lives under the guise of it being for the kids. We pick up on your shit. It's a terrible example to set. Story 18. Telling your kid they are always a winner. We love our kids and want them to feel special, but it's setting them up to be disappointed later in life when they find out not everyone can win. Let them feel the disappointments early on and teach them it's okay. They'll grow up better able to handle the stresses of life. Story 19. The saddest part of this question is that my mom has done so many things that everyone is saying is bad. Not hugging, praising, telling me to suck it up, etc. So let me give one that I feel would have helped me out growing up. Do not be afraid to admit when you are wrong or when you make mistakes to your child. My parents would go out of their way to justify any mistake they made and make it seem as if they were right no matter what the situation was. Gave me a pretty messed up view of right and wrong, as well as learning from mistakes, but was fixed by my grandma. It's a long story that I don't want to get into right now. But on a serious note, I want to reiterate the importance of not only advice, but the consequences of not taking said advice. X. My parents never congratulated me on good grades, doing the right thing, etc. They would only say, that's what you're supposed to do, or you better keep it up, and threaten me if I didn't live up to their expectations. So now, as an adult, I'm insanely suspicious, and at the same time worried of people complimenting me or congratulating me for anything I do. Story 20. I grew up in a very strict Asian household. My parents were very strict on the never wake us up policy. To this day, I get very anxious and refuse to wake people up in fear of being yelled at and locked in a closet. I'm 22 years old. Story 21. Treating crying as if it's something only weak people do. My dad in particular used to yell at me for crying, which only made me cry more, which made him yell more, and you get the point. In high school, I tried to bring up the possibility of me having anxiety problems that I'd spoken to the school counselor about because my friends made me go since they were worried. He told me I was just a drama queen. I can't express that I'm anxious or stressed around my dad because others have it worse. Even now I'm 21 and seeing a psychiatrist in a couple of weeks because I've just felt so bad lately and I would never let my dad know. I think I'd rather die than my dad knowing I've been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility of me having OCD with said psychiatrist, which does explain a lot and is actually kind of comforting for me to know because he'd get so mad at me for being weak. Story 22. Making them give physical affection when they don't want to. If Uncle Bob makes them uncomfortable, don't make them give him a hug. If Aunt Karen freaks them out, don't make them give her a kiss. Of course, it's important that they be kind, but don't teach them that the feelings of others is more important than their bodily autonomy. Story 23. Never saying sorry to your kids. My mom only just recently started telling me sorry when she gets worked up. It's built up such resentment for her over the years, and I also have trouble saying sorry to myself because of it. Tell your kids sorry, especially if you overreact to something they did. Story 24. Not giving them a factual and straightforward sex ed talk. My parents answered my questions truthfully and at an age-appropriate level throughout my childhood, and I'm extremely thankful for it. Others around me have clearly not been that lucky. Story 25. In my experience, the inability to keep a conversation light and positive. For example, if I received an A on a test and I brought it up at the dinner table, within 5 minutes we would be having a tense discussion about some other class I should be doing better in. Or it has turned negative on one of my siblings. Well, why the heck would I bother bringing something up if it's going to remind you of something you yell about regularly? In the same vein, the inability to withhold more important discussions for another time. My parents never considered planning a sit-down with me for a serious discussion about something I'm doing wrong or did wrong. Rather, they'd spring it on me when I'm trapped in a car with them, or at the dinner table, or when I'm least expecting it, or simply need to be doing something else. Important discussions were simply interjected into everyday life, and it led to me having bad anxiety and the inability to just relax around my parents. This may actually be part of some larger complex I have about my parents, not having healthy divisions between themselves and other individuals. Like they don't respect or acknowledge that their kids are fully separate people who think in different ways. If I was living in a way that disappointed my parents throughout my adult life, they would die young and allow it to take decades of their lives because they are so intertwined in other people's business. They would never think their adult children deserve the respect of a coffee date or lunch in order to discuss a big issue. It would just be spewed out at the wrong time. They have no emotional intelligence and are the most judgmental people I've ever met. Story 26. Mocking them, laughing at them. Adults do it to each other all the time, but kids who haven't been immersed in the background cruelty of our culture for years don't understand that it's just the language of the land, and not that they themselves are particularly unworthy of respect. Story 27. Not creating a safe space for your kids to tell their secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mom about my first boyfriend, but instead of calmly talking me through this, she immediately brought my dad in the conversation, and they both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. Story 28. Giving into your kids' wants and desires without upholding discipline and consequences will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this because my parents babysat me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. UX. When I started getting bad grades, BC, I wasn't doing my homework. My parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents, and who's to say if they did discipline me more that I'd have turned out any different? Probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids, I already know a few things I'd do differently. Story 29. I feel like most of these responses fall under seemingly harmful. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child with something when they do something they already enjoy. Take, for example, reading. If a child just enjoys reading, let the child read without giving any reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that act, their intrinsic motivation gets replaced. It's called the overjustification effect. Story 30. I found that when my parents teased me about stuff I was clearly uncomfortable with, it made me tell them less later. later in life. I have a good relationship with my parents, but I don't tell them lots about my life because it's easier if they don't know / tease about it. Story 31. Not letting them have freedoms, such as going out with friends, making their own friends, things such as these. I'm 17 and I'm just now getting actual friends outside of school. I was never allowed to go do anything as a kid. I know it's my parents caring about me, but it's hurt me more in the long run. It's caused some serious social anxiety.